"Your father sent me," said the gunslinger to the girl who thought she had no family left. The dust hung in the air like old prayers, thick and still over Canyon Creek. Nothing moved except the wind through broken windows and the steady clip of horse hooves on cracked earth. The town had been dying for 3 years now, ever since the mine played out and the railroad chose a different path. Most folks packed up and left. The stubborn ones stayed until the water turned bad. The desperate ones held on until winter came without enough food to last. But Canyon Creek wasn't completely empty. Marcus Holt knew this because of the smoke. A thin line of gray rose from behind the church, steady as a heartbeat. Someone was still here, still fighting the silence that had swallowed every other living thing for miles around. His horse picked her way carefully between the scattered boards and rusted nails that littered Main Street. The saloon doors hung crooked on bent hinges. The general store gaped open like a mouth that had forgotten how to speak. Paint peeled from every surface, curling away from the wood like old skin. Marcus had seen plenty of ghost towns, but this one felt different. This one still had breath in it. He found her behind the church, just as he'd expected, a small figure kneeling beside a grave that looked newer than the others. Her back was straight, her head bowed. In her hands, she held a handful of wildflowers that had somehow found water in this forgotten place. She was maybe 12 years old, with hair the color of wheat after harvest and a dress that had been mended so many times it looked more like a patchwork quilt. Her feet were bare, toughened by months of walking on hard ground. A rusted knife hung from a piece of rope around her waist. Marcus climbed down from his horse slowly, making sure his boots made noise on the dry earth. The girl's head came up fast, and her hand went to the knife. "Easy there," Marcus said, keeping his voice soft. "Just passing through." The girl stood and turned to face him. Her eyes were green as river stones, and they held the kind of wariness that came from living alone too long. She reached down without looking and picked up a stone from beside the grave. "Don't need any passing through," she said. Her voice was clear and strong, but Marcus could hear the tremor underneath. "Keep writing." Marcus studied her face. She had the look of someone who'd grown up too fast, but there was still something young in the set of her mouth, the way she held her shoulders. She was trying to be brave and doing a fair job of it. "Name's Marcus," he said. "What's yours?" "Don't matter what my name is." She hefted the rock in her small hand. "You need to go. This your town now?" "Much as anyone's." Marcus nodded toward the grave. "Your ma." The girl's jaw tightened, but she didn't answer. Her thumb rubbed against the smooth surface of the stone. "Been taking care of her for a while, I'd guess," Marcus said, bringing her flowers, keeping the weeds away. "She don't need strangers looking at her." "No," Marcus agreed. "I don't suppose she does." The wind picked up, stirring the dust around their feet. The girl's dress fluttered, and Marcus could see how thin she'd gotten. Her wrists were like bird bones. Her cheeks had the hollow look that came from too many meals of nothing but hope. "When's the last time you had a real meal?" Marcus asked. "Don't need your food. I've got beans in my pack. Coffee, too." The girl's eyes flickered toward his horse, where his supplies were tied behind the saddle. But she shook her head and raised a rock higher. "I said go." Marcus took a half step back, showing he wasn't a threat. But he didn't turn away. "I knew a man once," he said, voice gentle as evening rain. "Good man. Worked hard, loved his family. Had a little girl with green eyes and hair like summer wheat." The rock in the girl's hand wavered. "This man, he got himself in some trouble. Not the kind he went looking for, but the kind that finds good folks sometimes anyway. He had to make a choice between staying with the people he loved and keeping them safe from the trouble that was following him." The girl's breathing had changed. Quick and shallow now. He chose to leave. Marcus continued. "Broke his heart clean in two, but he left. Because sometimes the best way to love someone is to take the danger away with you." "Why are you telling me this?" The girl's voice was barely a whisper. Marcus reached slowly into his shirt pocket and pulled out a small piece of paper, worn soft from handling. "Because before he died, he asked me to find his daughter. Asked me to tell her that leaving her was the hardest thing he ever did, and that he thought about her every day until the day he couldn't think anymore." The stone tumbled from the girl's fingers and hit the ground with a soft thud. He said her name was Emma. Marcus said, "Emma Claire Patterson." The girl took a step backward, her hand reaching out to steady herself against her mother's headstone. Said she had a birthmark on her left shoulder, shaped like a crescent moon. Said she could whistle any tune after hearing it just once. Said she was scared of thunder, but would sit on the porch and watch lightning dance across the sky. Emma's legs gave out, and she sank down beside the grave. Her small hands pressed flat against the earth, as if she could draw strength from the place where her mother slept. "You're lying," she whispered. Marcus folded the paper carefully and put it back in his pocket. "Your daddy's name was Thomas Patterson. Tom to his friends. He was a lawman up in Silver Ridge until the Kellerman gang decided the town belonged to them. He stood up to them when nobody else would. They put a price on his head, and he knew they wouldn't stop until they collected it." Emma was crying now, silent tears that cut tracks through the dust on her cheeks. "So he left," Marcus said. "Told everyone he was running scared. Let them think he was a coward. Better than let them know about the wife and daughter he was trying to protect. He drew the Kellermans away, led them on a chase that lasted 2 years. They caught him finally up near the Colorado line. But by then, he figured you and your ma would be safe. She got sick," Emma said, her voice breaking. "After he left, she just got sick. Wouldn't eat, wouldn't sleep, just sat by the window waiting for him to come home." Marcus felt something heavy settle in his chest. He didn't know. She died calling his name. The wind died away, leaving them in a silence that felt like held breath. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk cried once and went quiet. Marcus waited while Emma wept for the father she'd hated and the mother she'd lost and the terrible loneliness of being the last light in a dying town. He waited until her sobs gentled into something softer, something that might someday become peace. When she finally looked up, her eyes held a different kind of sadness. Not the bitter anger she'd carried all this time, but the clean grief that comes after truth washes the poison away. "He really sent you?" she asked. "He did. What am I supposed to do now?" Marcus looked at the small grave, then at the girl who had been guarding it with nothing but stones and stubbornness and a rusted knife that probably couldn't cut butter. He thought about the letter in his pocket, the one Tom Patterson had written with shaking hands the night before the Kellermans finally caught up with him. The letter that spoke of family Emma didn't know she had, and a future that stretched beyond this graveyard in a forgotten town. But that was a conversation for tomorrow, when the shock had settled and she was ready to hear about possibilities instead of just pain. "Right now," Marcus said, "I think we should get you something to eat." Emma watched Marcus build the fire with hands that knew their work. He gathered dry wood from the broken fence behind the church, arranged it careful and neat, struck a match that flared bright against the gathering dusk. The flame caught and held, pushing back the shadows that had been her only companions for so long. She sat on her mother's grave because it felt like the right place to be. The headstone made a good backrest, and the earth beneath her was soft from all her tears. Marcus didn't tell her to move. He just opened his pack and pulled out a dented pot, a cloth bag of beans, and a strip of salt pork that made her mouth water despite everything. "Haven't had meat in 2 months, she said without meaning to. Marcus nodded like this was information worth having. "Been living on what you could find. Wild onions mostly. Some berries when I could beat the birds to them. There's a few chickens left, but they're smarter than I am." Chickens usually are. Emma watched him work. He moved slow and steady, like he had all the time in the world. The beans went into the pot with water from his canteen. The salt pork got sliced thin with a knife that was clean and sharp and well cared for. Not like her rusted blade that couldn't cut much more than her own hope. "How long were you with him?" she asked. "My father." Marcus looked up from the pot. 3 months, give or take. Met up with him in a town called Dry Creek. He was hurt, needed someone to watch his back while he healed. "Were you friends?" "We became friends." The fire crackled, sending sparks up into the darkening sky. Emma pulled her knees to her chest and waited for him to say more. She'd learned that silence made people want to fill it, and she needed to know everything about the man who'd left her and her mother to die alone. "Your daddy was careful," Marcus said finally. "Never used his real name. Never stayed anywhere long enough for folks to remember his face. But he wasn't running scared like he wanted people to think. He was running smart. Marcus stirred the beans with a wooden spoon worn smooth from years of use. The smell made Emma's stomach clench with hunger, but she tried not to show it. The Kellermans weren't just outlaws, Marcus continued. They were the kind of men who enjoyed hurting people. The kind who would burn down a church just to watch the flames dance. When they put that bounty on your father's head, they made it clear they wouldn't be satisfied with just killing him. They want to hurt everyone he'd ever cared about. Emma felt something cold settle in her chest. So he left to protect us. He left to save you. The beans were starting to bubble. Marcus pulled out 2 tin plates, scratched and dented but clean. He filled them both, handed one to Emma with a spoon that had seen better days but still had purpose. Emma took a bite and had to close her eyes. Salt and pork and beans, cooked with care, tasted like the finest meal she'd ever eaten. She tried to eat slow, tried to make it last, but her body had other ideas. She cleaned the plate in minutes and looked up to find Marcus watching her with something like sorrow in his eyes. More where that came from, he said, and filled her plate again. This time she managed to pace herself. The food settled warm in her belly, and for the first time in months, she felt like maybe she wouldn't just blow away in the next strong wind. Tell me about him, she said. What was he like? Marcus broke off a piece of hardtack and chewed it thoughtfully. He was quiet mostly, not unfriendly, just careful with his words, like he was afraid of saying too much. Mama said he used to sing to me when I was little, before everything went bad. He remembered that. Told me you had a sweet voice, like your mother. Said you could carry a tune better than most grown folks. Emma felt tears prick at her eyes again, but these were different. Softer somehow. He talked about you every night, Marcus said. Soon as we'd make camp, he'd pull out this little picture he carried. Worn thing, edges all soft from handling. You and your mama standing in front of this very church. I remember that picture. Traveling photographer came through when I was 8. Your daddy would look at it and tell me stories about how you used to climb the apple tree behind your house. How you bring him coffee in the morning, serious as a judge, trying not to spill a drop. How you'd sit on his lap while he read the newspaper and ask him what every big word meant. Emma set down her plate. These were memories she'd buried deep, covered over with years of anger and hurt. But hearing them from Marcus made them feel real again, like pieces of herself she'd lost and forgotten. He was proud of you, Marcus said. Prouder than any man has a right to be. Said you were brave and smart and stubborn as a mule when you set your mind to something. If he was so proud, why didn't he take us with him? Marcus poked at the fire with a stick, sending new sparks dancing upward. Because he loved you more than he loved himself. And sometimes that's what love looks like. Sometimes it looks like walking away. That's not love. That's leaving. Sometimes they're the same thing. Emma wrapped her arms around her knees again. The fire was warm on her face, but the rest of her felt cold. Mama never understood. She kept saying he'd come back. Even at the end, when the fever was making her talk to people who weren't there, she kept asking when Tom was coming home. He wanted to come home, Marcus said quietly. Wanted it so bad it was eating him alive. But he knew the Kellermans were still out there. Knew they'd eventually track him down no matter where he went. He couldn't risk leading them back to you. So he died alone. No. Marcus looked at her across the fire. He died knowing you were safe. That was worth everything to him. Worth more than his own life. The fire settled lower, and the night sounds began. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called out lonesome and wild. Emma listened to it echo off the empty buildings, thinking about fathers who loved their children enough to disappear and mothers who died from broken hearts. There's something else, Marcus said. Something your daddy wanted you to have. He reached into his pack and pulled out a small bundle wrapped in oilcloth. His hands were gentle as he unwrapped it, careful as someone handling something precious. Inside was a tin star, tarnished but whole. A lawman's badge. He was wearing this the night he left, Marcus said. Told me to give it to you when you were old enough to understand what it meant. What it cost him to pin it on every morning. Emma reached out with trembling fingers and touched the star. It felt heavier than something so small should feel. He died wearing this. He died a lawman. died protecting people who never even knew his name. Just like he protected you by staying away. The fire burned lower still, and Emma held the badge up to catch the last of the light. In its surface, she could see her own reflection, distorted but recognizable. She could also see something else. The ghost of the man who'd worn it before her. The father who'd loved her enough to break both their hearts. Tomorrow, she thought, she would ask Marcus about the letter she'd seen him touch earlier, about what came next now that the truth had been told. But tonight, she just wanted to sit by this fire and remember what it felt like to have someone take care of her, even if it was just beans and hardtack and stories about a father who'd never stopped loving her from far away. Emma woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Marcus moving quiet around their small camp. The fire had burned down to coals, but he'd kept it alive through the night. She sat up slow, her body stiff from sleeping on the ground, and found him crouched by the flames with the coffee pot balanced on a flat stone. The tin star lay beside her, where she'd fallen asleep holding it. In the morning light, she could see scratches and dents that told stories she didn't know. Her father's stories, marked in metal and memory. Salapaan? Marcus asked without looking up. Some. Emma picked up the badge and turned it over in her hands. On the back, someone had scratched initials. Tepe Thomas Patterson. Her father's true mark on the world. I dreamed about him. Good dreams or bad ones? Different ones. Marcus nodded like he understood what she meant. He poured coffee into 2 cups, handed her one. It was strong and bitter and exactly what she needed to push away the last cobwebs of sleep. Marcus, she said, why were you with him? Really? You said you met up in Dry Creek, but that doesn't tell me why you stayed. Marcus settled back on his heels and studied her face. Emma got the feeling he was deciding how much truth she could handle. She straightened her shoulders and met his eyes steady. I'm not a child anymore, she said. I've been taking care of myself for over a year. I bury my own mother. I think I can handle whatever you need to tell me. Your father saved my life, Marcus said finally, and not in some small way. He pulled me out of a burning building after the Kellermans set fire to the hotel in Dry Creek. Could have left me there. Would have been smart to leave me there, seeing as how helping me meant showing his face when he should have stayed hidden. Emma waited for him to continue. See, I wasn't just any stranger caught in that fire. I was a bounty hunter who'd been tracking him for 3 weeks. The coffee cup froze halfway to Emma's lips. You were hunting my father? I was. Had a poster with his picture on it, though the name was wrong. The Kellermans were paying good money for information about where Tom Patterson might be hiding. Emma set the cup down hard. Coffee slopped over the rim and hissed against the hot stone. You were going to turn him in. That was the plan. But you didn't. Marcus shook his head. Hard to turn in a man who risks his life to save yours. Harder still when you find out the whole story's a lie. The wind picked up, stirring dust around their camp. Emma pulled her knees to her chest and waited for Marcus to explain. After he pulled me from that fire, after he got me to a doctor and made sure I'd live, I asked him why. Why save the man who was hunting him? You know what he said? Emma shook her head. He said every life was worth saving, even the ones that were trying to end his. Said that was what the badge meant. What had always meant, even when he couldn't wear it anymore. Marcus reached into his shirt and pulled out a folded piece of paper. The same one Emma had seen him touch the day before. It was worn soft as cloth, like something that had been read 1,000 times. After I healed up, I told him I wasn't going to collect that bounty. Told him I'd ride with him instead, help him stay ahead of the Kellermans. That's when he gave me this. He held out the paper to Emma. Her hands trembled as she took it. It's for you, Marcus said. He wrote it the night before the Kellermans caught up with us. Made me promise to read it to you if something happened to him. Emma unfolded the letter careful as handling butterfly wings. The paper was covered in her father's handwriting, the same careful script she remembered from shopping lists and birthday notes. But this was different. These words carried the weight of a man's whole heart. Read it to me, she whispered. Marcus cleared his throat and began, My dearest Emma, if you are hearing this, then I am gone, and Marcus has found you like I asked him to. I pray you are well and strong and still the brave girl I remember. I know you must hate me for leaving. I know your mother died, thinking I abandoned you both. That knowledge has been a knife in my chest every day since I rode away from Canyon Creek. But I need you to understand why I had to go. The Kellermans killed 12 people in Silver Ridge. Good people. A shopkeeper named Henry who gave candy to children. A woman named Sarah who taught Sunday school. 2 boys not much older than you are now. They killed them because these people stood with me when the Kellermans came to town demanding tribute. I was the law in Silver Ridge. I wore the badge and took an oath to protect innocent folks. But when the Kellermans came, I learned that sometimes protecting people means taking the danger away from them. They wanted me dead, Emma, but they wanted to hurt me first. And the best way to hurt a man is through the people he loves most. So I made them think I was a coward, made them think I was running scared, led them on a chase that took me far from you and your mother. Every mile I rode away from home was a mile of safety I was buying for you with my own blood. I never stopped loving you. Never stopped thinking about you and your sweet voice and the way you used to bring me coffee in the mornings. I carried your picture with me everywhere. It was the last thing I looked at every night and the first thing I saw every morning. Marcus will tell you about your Aunt Margaret in Prescott, your mother's sister. She doesn't know about you yet, but she will welcome you. You have family, Emma. You have a future that stretches beyond the mistakes I made and the choices that took me away from you. The badge I'm giving you belonged to my father and his father before him. It's not just a piece of tin. It's a promise to stand up for what's right, even when it costs everything, even when it breaks your heart. You don't have to wear it. You don't have to be what I was. But I want you to have it so you remember that your father died a lawman, not an outlaw. Died protecting people, not running from them. I love you more than all the stars in the sky and all the water in the ocean. More than my own life, which I would give 1,000 times over to keep you safe. Your father, always and forever, Thomas Patterson. The words hung in the air between them like smoke from the dying fire. Emma stared at the letter, at the careful script that held her father's love and pain and desperate hope. Aunt Margaret, she said finally, your mother's sister, lives in Prescott with her husband and 2 sons. They have a ranch, raise horses. Good people, for what your father told me. Emma folded the letter and held it against her chest. She doesn't know I exist? Your mother and her sister had some kind of falling out before you were born. But your father believed family was family, no matter what happened before. He thought Margaret would want to know about you. The tin star lay heavy in Emma's other hand. She could feel the weight of 3 generations of lawmen, the promise her father had carried and the price he'd paid for keeping it. The Kellermans, she said. Are they still out there? Marcus shook his head. Dead. All of them. Your father led them into an ambush up near Colorado Springs. Took 3 of them with him when he went down. The law finished the rest. Emma closed her eyes and felt something inside her chest break open. Not break apart, but break free. The anger she'd carried for so long, the bitter hurt that had kept her company through the loneliest nights, cracked like ice in spring sun. Her father hadn't abandoned her. He'd saved her. Had died, saving not just her, but a whole town full of people who would never know his name or what he'd sacrificed for them. I want to go to Prescott, she said. I want to meet my aunt. Marcus smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him. I was hoping you'd say that. Emma stood and walked to her mother's grave. She knelt down and pressed her hand against the earth, feeling the morning sun warm on her back. I understand now, Mama, she whispered. I understand why you waited for him. Why you never stopped believing he'd come home. He did come home, just not the way we thought he would. She kissed her fingers and pressed them to the headstone. Then she stood and turned back to Marcus, who was already breaking down their camp. The road to Prescott stretched ahead of them, long and uncertain. But for the first time since her mother died, Emma felt ready to walk it. They left Canyon Creek as the sun painted the eastern hills gold and pink. Emma sat tall on the mare Marcus had bought from a rancher 2 days' ride south, her few belongings tied in a bundle behind the saddle. The tin star rode safe in her shirt pocket, close to her heart. Her father's letter was folded careful in her other pocket, a map to understanding she would carry the rest of her days. She turned once to look back at the church, at the small grave beside it, where wildflowers still bloomed despite the dying town around them. but she didn't feel the pull to stay that had held her captive for so long. Her mother slept peaceful now, and Emma finally understood that some chains were meant to be broken, not by force but by love. "You all right?" Marcus asked, riding easy beside her. "I think so." Emma touched the pocket where the star rested. "It's strange, leaving the only place I've ever known. Strange good or strange bad?" Emma considered this as their horses picked their way around the scattered debris that marked Canyon Creek's dying edges. Behind them, dust settled back into silence. Ahead, the road stretched wide and empty, leading toward mountains that looked purple in the morning light. "Strange, like waking up from a long dream," she said finally. Marcus nodded. "Dreams can be comfortable, even the sad ones. Sometimes they're easier than being awake." They rode in easy silence for a while, the only sounds their horses' hooves and the creak of leather and the whisper of wind through dry grass. Emma felt herself settling into the rhythm of travel, the gentle sway that rocked her like a cradle. She'd never been this far from home before, had never seen the world stretch out so wide and full of possibility. "Tell me about Prescott," she said. Marcus shifted in his saddle. "Your father didn't tell me much about your Aunt Margaret, just that she and your mother had words before you were born, and that family was family no matter what came before." "What kind of words?" "The kind sisters sometimes have, about choices and paths, and the way life should be lived. Your mother chose to marry a lawman and live in a small town. Margaret chose to marry a rancher and build something bigger." Emma thought about this. Maybe she won't want me. Maybe she will. That's not much comfort. Marcus pulled his hat down against the strengthening sun. Sometimes comfort isn't what we need. Sometimes we need possibility instead. They stopped at midday to rest the horses and eat the food Marcus had packed. Bread and cheese and dried apples that tasted like sunshine. Emma sat in the shade of a cottonwood and watched their horses drink from a clear stream. The water ran over smooth stones, talking to itself in a language older than words. "I keep thinking about what you said," Emma told Marcus. "About my father saving your life. What about it? You could have just rode away after that. Could have taken your debt as paid and gone your own direction. But you stayed with him for 3 months. Why?" Marcus was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice carried something Emma had never heard from him before. Something that sounded like old pain finally finding words. "I had a daughter once," he said, "about your age when she died. Fever took her one winter when I was off chasing outlaws for bounty money. My wife sent word, but I didn't get the message in time. Came home to find them both buried in the ground, and my house empty as a broken shell." Emma felt her chest tighten. "I'm sorry. Been carrying that guilt for 5 years now. Telling myself if I'd been there, if I'd chosen family over money, maybe things would have been different." Marcus looked up at the sky, where clouds drifted slow and white. "Your father showed me what it looked like when a man chose his family first, even when it cost him everything. So you stayed with him because he reminded you of what you should have been. I stayed with him because he reminded me of what I could still become." They mounted up and rode on. The land began to change as they traveled west, rolling hills giving way to deeper valleys, scrub brush growing taller and greener. Emma could smell water in the air and something else, something that might have been hope. Late in the afternoon, they came to a crossroads where 4 paths met under a weathered signpost. One arrow pointed north toward Silver Ridge. Another pointed south toward towns Emma had never heard of. The third pointed back the way they'd come, toward Canyon Creek and everything she was leaving behind. The 4th arrow pointed west toward Prescott, toward family and futures and all the unknowns that waited beyond the mountains. Marcus stopped his horse and looked at Emma. "This is where we part ways if you want to change your mind. I can take you back to Canyon Creek. Help you make a go of it there, if that's what you choose." Emma stared at the signpost, at the 4 directions that pulled at her like the 4 winds. She thought about the grave she'd tended so carefully, about the empty town that had become her prison, about the anger she'd carried like stones in her pockets. Then she thought about her father's letter, about the aunt who didn't know she existed, about the possibility of belonging somewhere again. "What will you do?" she asked Marcus. After you take me to Prescott, move on, I suppose. Find the next person who needs finding. Emma reached into her pocket and pulled out the tin star. It caught the afternoon light and threw it back in bright fragments. My father's letter said this badge belonged to his father and his father before him. That's right. 3 generations of lawmen. Marcus waited, sensing she was working towards something important. I think, Emma said slowly, that maybe it doesn't have to be 4. She held the star out to Marcus. I think maybe there are other ways to protect people. Other ways to serve something bigger than yourself. Marcus stared at the badge in her small hand. Emma, I can't take that. It's yours by right, and I'm giving it to you by choice. Emma's voice was steady and sure. You saved me, Marcus. Not just from Canyon Creek, but from the hate I was carrying. From the person I was becoming. If that's not what a lawman does, I don't know what is. Marcus took the star with hands that trembled slightly. He turned it over, reading the initials scratched into the back. Tippe. Thomas Patterson. A good man's mark on an imperfect world. I'm honored, he said quietly. More honored than you know. Emma smiled, and for the first time since her mother died, it felt like sunshine breaking through clouds. Then pin it on. Deputy Holt. They rode toward Prescott as the sun began its slide toward the western hills. Behind them, their shadows stretched long and dark across the road they traveled. Ahead, the mountains waited patient and purple, holding secrets and possibilities in their ancient folds. Emma thought about Canyon Creek, sleeping quiet in the gathering dusk. For the first time in years, no smoke would rise from behind the church. No small figure would kneel beside a lonely grave. The town could finally rest, released from its duty as keeper of one girl's grief. And maybe that was the greatest gift Emma could give in return. Not her presence, but her absence. Not staying to tend what was dead, but leaving to nurture what might yet live. The road opened before them like forgiveness itself, wide and generous and full of grace. Emma touched her father's letter in her pocket one more time, then urged her horse forward into the promise of tomorrow. Some journeys begin with loss, she thought, but the best ones end with finding what you never knew you were looking for. Miles ahead, smoke rose from the chimneys of Prescott, where a woman named Margaret was about to learn she had a niece. Where a girl named Emma was about to discover that family wasn't just blood, but choice. Where 2 travelers would arrive bearing gifts more precious than gold. Truth, forgiveness, and the chance to begin again. The sun set behind them as they rode into their new story, leaving Canyon Creek to its well-earned peace and taking with them everything that mattered. Love, hope, and the knowledge that sometimes the greatest courage is knowing when to let go.